Tere hommikust ja
Good morning and welcome back. Welcome back to the Estonian Academy of Security Sciences. We are continuing our conference Road Towards a Safe Tomorrow. And today we will again focus on civil protection topics. My name is Ingrid Redka and I will introduce this conference day. Yesterday our moderator was Lea Vainult, who unfortunately is not available today, and I have taken over the moderator's role for today. Although my daily work is the work of the Vice Rector for Academic Affairs at the Academy of Security Sciences. Yesterday we had a very interesting conference day. We heard stories from home and from further away, from Ukraine, from Finland, Sweden, Germany, Belgium, and even the Hiiumaa Highland. And today will also be a very exciting day filled with panel discussions, which are led by the top actors of the sector. But a few comments from yesterday as well, which I would like to share with you. A few quotations from yesterday. A state does well if things are good back home. Safety starts from each individual. If everyone does their part and a bit more, then things are well. Crises are solved in cooperation. Please put your hand up if yesterday when you were listening to Mart Raidma's metaphor about the trapeze. Who Googled the shape of trapeze? In your head or on Google? At least 4 people. And a few more ideas about cooperation. It is no good to just have computers communicating between them. People have to communicate. #AI. Long command lines are not fruitful. Estonia is not a small country, it's a very small country. And advice for a country as small is to find friends, and find friends. The key to success is in cooperation, sharing information, learning from experience. Because when a crisis hits, the first thing to go off track is the plan. These are precisely the topics that we will continue discussing today. Today's agenda is made up of 2 panel discussion blocks. You can now choose between 3 sessions, which you can see on the screen at 8:45. You can spread out between 3 rooms, 107, 108 or 105. You can see the topics here on the screen. In these rooms there will be panel discussions and a workshop as well. So please make your choice and you can then go to the specific room. At 11:15, the first discussions will be over. This will be followed by 45 minutes of break, and then again you can choose the topic you would like to discuss in the afternoon. I would like to invite all of you to participate actively, whether you are in rooms or online. Do keep up with the topics and participate as much as possible. And a small reminder, in the panel discussions taking place in this room, 108, there is interpretation between English and Estonian. And all sessions can be joined online as well. And all discussions in each of the rooms will be recorded and you can watch them later. After these today's two panel discussions, I would like to invite you back to join us in this room at 1:30, and the leaders of each panel, I would like to ask them to share the most important ideas that were highlighted in the panels. And this will be the end of our planned program. So perhaps we could have all the topics back on each of the screens. Please make your choice and choose the room where you would like to discuss. I wish you a very fruitful day and a lot of participation. The first panelists for this room can already join us on the seats, and the others can find their respective rooms.
Ma lähen võtan ukse taga. Aga Tuuli, ma annangi sõna sulle.
Hello everyone. I am very glad to lead this panel discussion here today, and I'm also very glad that the people who are here this morning are part of this panel. I really wanted them to be here, so we have Colonel Eero Rebo, head of the Defence League, Lea Vainult, and from State Security, and then the Vice Director of the Police and Border Guard Board on the Customs, and Tauno Suurkivi from the Rescue Board. But first, in order to have a kind of a warm-up, then an introductory question to you. So if we talk about civil protection and protecting the population in a crisis, then what do we need to be prepared for, and how much time do we have? Just a quick answer round. Well, the worst that can happen to us is war, so we need to be prepared for war, and we need to see these crises whether we are able to use the same capabilities during peacetime. We need to be ready for war tonight, which means that we need to be as ready as we can to keep peace and to be those dangerous people for the enemy that they wouldn't want to mess with us. I think we... As Colonel Rebo said, we need to be ready for everything. And I was thinking about the storm we had at the weekend, and I was listening to the news yesterday where insurance companies were, when they gave an interview, and if people are not ready for a storm, you know, people were notified to put the furniture from the garden away, and people don't even listen to that. If this storm is a surprise to you, if every year the snow surprises you, if cyber attacks, people give cyber terrorists money every day, so we should start with the small things. And the ultimate goal will be that we have to be ready for war, because our neighboring country showed that they're not joking, they really are ready to attack. Veiko, please. Yes, thank you. Well, we needed to be ready a day before yesterday. There's nothing here that we can wait till tonight or tomorrow. And in the light of all the crises of the last 3 years, these have characterized how you would need to be ready. And the latest is from this morning, where all schools receive a mass, and medical institution and educational institution received bomb threats. So yes, indeed, this is a spam attack, but in reality, we need to be ready for the situation where there was a mass evacuation from these and to find this bomb. Because at one moment this can become reality, and we need to be ready for these already yesterday and not wait till tomorrow. And Colonel Rebo said we need to be ready for war, but war for me is too abstract of a term. So from a rescue board point of view, we need to be ready for the consequences of war, which means that we must define to ourselves what are the consequences of war. And the consequence for the military and the Defence League is their activities, but local governments, rescue board, the population, we must understand what are the consequences of war. They are definitely events that we also see during peacetime, whether it's power outages, interruptions to vital services. But the war also brings along other consequences that we don't see during peace. For example, missile attacks. And so we have a very big task. Not that we should start, we're already doing it, but it's very clearly understood what are the consequences of war. Which of these exist during peacetime and what will jump up. So, for example, if buildings collapse, it's something that doesn't really happen during peacetime, but it does happen during wartime quite often. So my keyword would be the consequences of war. Yes, very good. It seems that we are ready to discuss these topics, and I will definitely allow people here to ask questions, but I'll move on and come back to the civil protection and the main basics, although this topic was covered yesterday, that civil protection is nothing new. We have the Geneva Convention, we have the civil protection concept, we have basis of security policy, everything that create a pillar for civil protection and set up the main principles, including how to protect the population during war. And not far from us, for almost 2 years, there has been a full-scale war, which is the Russian Federation's full-scale war against the Ukraine. So if we try and interpret what's happening in the Ukraine to us, what can we take from that, considering that our geographical location is a little bit different, our size is different, and also if our crisis preparedness basics are that we presume, we think that these structures and principles that we create and that function in normal situation also work in crisis situations. And if we look at what's happening in the Ukraine, how do we interpret and what are the lessons that we can take from there? Perhaps Lea, from the State Chancellery point of view and the strategical point of view, how do you see it? I believe that the most important on the top level side is that we need to cooperate with countries. Estonia alone shouldn't prepare for itself, but they should cooperate with Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, who is now a NATO member, because we are much stronger when we're united, whether we talk about trade or sheltering people or something else. So just as the Defence League has been telling for a long time, Baltic as one battleground. This is also in the security policy, but also from civil protection we should move on from that. And the second thing that we could do in Estonia is the preparedness of institutions. So the country is kind of very thin. We are built to fulfill the purposes of peacetime, and I know there's not enough finances, but we need to think through whether as an employee I know what my tasks are during a crisis and how do I do them when crisis hits. But we should actually spend a little bit more time thinking about them. The small things in the end become one big thing. Yes. Eero, what can we take as lessons from the Ukraine? If theoretically we'll be talking about the war being in Estonia. If we see what's happening in the Ukraine, what would be different? I think first and foremost we shouldn't take Ukraine as a cooking book. The soup was made that way over there. We should actually bring all these items to Estonian context, to our opportunities, because the way our state functions over the last 30 years that we've had over here is way different from the Ukraine. I've been there a couple times myself, and I've observed over there what are the things that we should take over. And if we talk about the war in the Ukraine, then we should go back to 2014. And even before that, to see how the hybrid wars took place and how the Ukrainians' brains, they tried to get them, they tried to get their way of thinking. We shouldn't also forget about psychological protection and how we build trust, not just with state institutions, but also with local governments and community leaders. I think the reason why the Ukrainians were able to put up resistance much better than in 2014 was that people actually realized that they are also responsibility. There are a lot of volunteers in the Ukraine, especially during the critical moments around the 24th of February. A lot of local governments and non-governmental organizations played their role, and this differentiated them from 2014, and this is a big lesson for us. We don't have enough people to cover and prepare for crisis. We need to involve the whole society and to go into that community, local government group, and to support the people there so they would actually cope themselves. Yes, thank you. I remember that in September I managed to go to Lviv in Ukraine, so the most western part of Ukraine, who took a lot of local refugees. Over 5 million people moved through Lviv or remained there. And when we asked this kind of a crisis regulation main question, but who coordinated, who organized the involvement of the volunteers? And then when for the third time they said, what do you mean we all did? Because the situation required that, then we didn't ask for the fourth time. So the more difficult the situation, the less we'll ask who is in charge of that, because it's our state's business, so that our states and population would survive. But Veiko, how do you view from an internal security and border security perspective what the Ukrainian lessons? In your assessments, what are the most important things for us? Yes, thank you. I would go back in time. The question is also about what surface this military action can be laid out on our own society's preparedness and feel in the context of whether our neighboring country it would make sense for them to spread the war over here. And in addition to Ukrainian lessons and helping Ukrainians, the state in parallel has diminished this possibility from accessing information so that people who live in Estonia would be in an Estonian information sphere, because that's where it all begins. As Colonel said before, that 2014 versus now. So how we were able to time it, how much of the society went along with it, if in an Estonian context 30% of the society should go along with it. And it's a completely different picture if they're in our information sphere, if they think like us, if they act like us. It gives a completely different situation. With the Ukraine, the amount of tasks and the fact they cannot be measured that they have had to deal with, that we haven't really considered much over here, but that you have to consider in a situation of war. And these tasks are also with internal security units. If you take war crimes, infiltration, it's critical to have all the pre-intelligence and involving volunteers. I think also in helping Ukrainian war refugees, we have some experience. And perhaps in the beginning it was a bit rocky. There's a lot of initiative in Estonia. We still have it on a high level. But our skill not to try and do everything ourselves, but to find the groups in our society and the people in our society who are ready to put as much effort in. Regarding borders, 2 years ago, a bit less than 2 years ago, border guards were the first one who felt the impact, and there's things that we need to think through. What will be our activities during this time if a tank should be in the Luhamaa border control point, and this sets a challenge for any good plans, and we also know that plans are not good on their own, but if you don't have a plan at all, you're failed anyway.
Yesterday, it was mentioned that in a crisis, all plans go out of the window. But Rauno, what about the rescue board's experience regarding Ukraine and civil protection? What would you highlight? First, I would like to create a link between yesterday's presenter Hans Das from the European Commission and today. Mr. Das mentioned that in Europe we haven't had an equivalent to 9/11 that the US had. This is what was like a wake-up call for Americans. Europeans, 9/11 was the war in Ukraine, so we got it about 20 years later, and it has shaken us quite a lot. This war definitely woke us from this haze where we were still wearing the pink shades of in Ukraine. We have seen that civilians are the target of attacks. Whether it is rescuers, the civil infrastructure, electricity, utilities, heating, district heating facilities, this puts us in a completely different position, and we must be ready for something completely different. This is our 9/11. We must think of how to protect rescuers. We need to think in a broader scale. I've gone to different countries, but I've never seen a country where the emergency center is not located underground or doesn't have a chance to move there quickly. Today, Estonia's emergency centers are where we first find out what has happened, because people call 112. There are different services that the emergency center offers, but today we do not have the capacity of moving the emergency center underground. But in most countries, like mentioned, it is underground permanently, or it can easily be moved there. But that's only one example. Looking at the society at large, we are very vulnerable to direct attacks to civilians. For this reason, I noticed that in Ukraine they don't mark civilian shelters because then these might become attack places that are attacked first. I think what we should learn from Ukraine is that war is not what's waged between soldiers, but it's something that affects the society and all aspects of the society. This is why planning is crucial in order for us all to be in the same information space. If the Defence League is doing something in their underground cellar and they think what the danger is, what the threat is, this is not what we should do. We should all come out of the cellars, be in the same information space and understand what threatens us, how the Defence League affects the civil society. what we must do in order to allow the Defence League to carry out their duties. So it's us as the civil society that can create the space where the Defence League can carry out their activities. But for this we need to plan all together. Plans can go out of the window, but we must have these plans. We must understand what the threats are, how they affect us all, because then we can be better prepared. This was just to continue Tarmo's thought. Veiko. I oppose to Tauno's idea, actually. If I may. Yes, you are welcome to. Of course, that's one approach. Having emergency centers deep underground in concrete, that's one approach. That's something we have seen in the war context. What we've seen is that those who can be mobile are successful. So maybe those providing information should be more mobile. On the other hand, the awareness of the society is important. What do I need to do apart from calling for help? A lot of people are calling the emergency center when there is an electricity power cut. Only 15% of the community has got electricity reserves at home. So I would say that we cannot deal with even simple crises on our own, not to mention military crisis. People themselves need to know the paths to take, and they need to think them through. What to do if there is a power cut? Where can I find water? Where can I use the bathroom? These very basic things. Most things in apartments do not work at all if there's no water. And that's why I think everyone should know about these topics. Eero, I am surprised by how surprised other people are that civilians are dying in wars. If we look at wars from the second part of the 20th century, then we can see that most casualties have been civilians. Terrorizing civilians and getting armies to surrender is a very old thought, but now we have people who are even more evil, who are applying this weapon in a more widespread scale, and we haven't even seen nuclear weapons which are even more brutal. There are just threats at the moment. So we need to look at this war from a broader aspect. In addition to the psychological side of things, we also need to think about how we can cope, how we can support those who have been less fortunate. Is our medical system ready for it? One thing that I think we should learn from Ukrainians is how to keep on living in a war situation. We cannot all hide in cellars and under tables. But the way Ukraine has continued with its education, economy, at the end of the day, they will win this war, and it must come to a country that is not burnt down, but a country that has continued its activities. Did you hear what the colonel said? The first line of war is civil protection, and the second line is the soldiers. Through civil infrastructure, actually, the army is being affected, but I don't want to create any false ideas here. We are all part of broad-scale national protection, and we must all be strong so the enemy cannot beat us. If there is one weak link, we have already lost the war. For many years, we have not invested in civil protection, and I'm not only talking about evacuation or stockpiling, but I'm talking about investing in people's skills. The key is not shelter, but taking shelter. How people are able to behave if there is an attack. And this is the vital services. What I suggested about an emergency center being underground, that was just an example. It doesn't have to be that. My idea was whether this is protected from the effects of war, whether we are able to create extra reserves in the society. So there are different parties that play a role in making the society ready for war. The keyword preliminary warning was mentioned. Looking at what's happening in Israel, I must ask, would preliminary warnings work in our case? Eero? Yes. That was a good short answer. Let's continue. And now, before I give the audience a chance to ask their questions, I'd like to ask my last question. War in Ukraine has been going on for quite some time now. And whether we want it or not, at some point a war can become a part of life. News that come from Ukraine are no longer what you read at nighttime or at just any moment. Is there a danger that in Estonia we might get tired of preparing for war, talking about military topics, about civil protection? What surrounds us is a tense situation, but how can we maintain this level of being alert in a long-term war? Veiko? That's a very good question and a very good observation. I think you answered it partly. One part of these activities takes place in Ukraine, but a lot of it takes place outside of Ukraine. As a country, we are constantly ready to solve any situations that come up. Let me give you an example. The migration attack organized by Belarus, which has been in the air for the past 3 years. One of its aims is to burden the countries that are under this flow of migration, and the other aim is to test our own reactions and resilience to these occurrences. In the past 3 years, when the attack started, it is only this year that we can see the increase of numbers. We cannot see any de-escalation. We do not have a border with Belarus, but we've been there in Latvia, in Lithuania, in Poland, and in the context of ally relationships, it's important to show them that they are not alone. At the weekend, There was some situations in the Gulf of Finland, and we are still wondering what exactly happened in Israel, the Hamas attacks, and calling for more action in other countries. These are not friendly actions, but these are all events that cause panic to the society. We are in the midst of all this, and in the past 3 to 4 years we've been very strong. This is what keeps us in form and helps us to avoid any tiredness of the war. Another question is whether all our friends and allies feel the same. Those countries that are further away, will they be still motivated to help Ukraine? I think today they still are.
Tauno, in the rescue board, how do we keep vigilance? I'll use this opportunity to argue with Veiko that we're tired of war. I think I will dispute this. I know there's politicians here with us. I'm not sure whether behind the screens as well. I've always said that you can talk about anything, but actual priorities are expressed in the numbers. So just a simple example, if we talk about money, if we invested €0 into civil population for 30 years, and then after the war, 1.5 months, they invested 51 millions that we still use to create different capabilities and competences. And now we have this knowledge that we got 2.3 million a year, but this is just enough to keep these new competences and for nothing else. So in essence, if we talk about being tired of war, yes, perhaps as a society we're not tired and not rhetorically tired, and perhaps we're not tired of the Defence League, police, rescue board as institutions, but if we look at different sectors from an investment point of view, then I see tiredness. From 51 million to 2.3 million. There's nothing that we can develop in civil protection. We can only train people, which yes, is important, and to train local governments. So in numbers, we can see this tiredness. Lea, how do you see this from the government point of view? As I don't have windows, I don't see very far. But I think it's quite logical that people are tired. It's in their nature. It's in your mental health. It's better for your mental health if you don't just surround yourself with the negative all the time, and what information you consume. Yes, when the war started in the Ukraine, we were all watching the news 24/7. The conflict in Israel, the same. For the first 24 hours, we're keeping our eye on it, but there's a limit how much negativity you can handle or you want in your life. You would like to look at falling leaves and mushrooms in the forest as well, so we can't just focus on the bad, but we need to find other aspects in our lives. And the last public survey shows that people's support is actually diminishing because there's so much negativity in Karabakh, Kosovo, Serbia are not getting along, and all the conflicts within Europe, now Hamas and Israel, Ukraine, war for almost 2 years. Everyone is estimating that it will go on through the winter, and then We cannot forget that Taiwan and China are not too friendly with each other either. So there are a lot of conflicts in the world, and as people we must select the information so we only take in what is necessary to us. But we must not forget that the crises are somewhere out there and we need to be ready for them. So perhaps the focus as a state, I'm not talking about supporting Ukraine, but from our point, the crisis, the focus should be on it, because there's a lot of crisis to actually accept they're actually happening, and this pink bubble that we have been in, nothing is happening, nothing is really going on. I remember someone from the rescue board explained why bigger companies don't have generators, but they said in the risk analysis that the fact that there's a power outage is as likely as aliens would come and visit us. So we need to get over that. It's not an alien level thing anymore. There are conflicts. The conflicts are here to stay, and we need to be better prepared. But the balance, so that it wouldn't break us, we need to find the balance as well. Eero, how to keep the preparations sharp? It's very easy to me. We should have alternatives. What will happen if we're not prepared, if we don't think these things through? And what happens then when we just do nothing and say we're tired? The alternatives are so gruesome that we cannot just do, we need to do something. And I'm hearing my colleagues here and how passionate they are, but I'm feeling if we have freedom, if we have opportunities in this life, then we are fighting for the same opportunities and freedom. Then why not continue enjoying them? If I look at our dear colleagues in the Ukraine, then I think that in Lviv you could also see completely normal life, which meant that everyone, where possible, the life in the Ukraine went on. And visiting a town in the Ukraine, which was very close to the front, and even there people didn't stop themselves. They wanted to go on with their lives. The ice cream truck was still running. The kids were buying ice cream. There were certain security issues, but they really tried to go on with a normal life. So why shouldn't us here in Estonia? Because we would let everyone rest like that. And let's go through the alternatives. If those who have retired are saying that the Soviet Union will come back, no, it's a grotesque country where violence and corruption is much bigger. We're not going to go back to 1980, but the violence that Ukraine is under is as cruel, if not crueler, than what our ancestors saw in the 40s. But it's even more gruesome. Yes, indeed, in Lviv we were the only ones who, when the sirens sounded and it was impossible not to hear the sirens, who then hid in the cellars. People carried on in the terraces of coffee shops and went on with their lives. So it's kind of this psychological approach to us that even during war life can go on. That it is possible, because today we don't really know what it would mean for us. But now I would really have a question. I would accept questions from the room. Maido, please. Thank you. Next to 12 o'clock next room we'll have the local governments as an important resource in helping people workshop. And I would like to get your input. In a situation of war, what are the expectations and presumptions that you have what the local government should do? What tasks do we have? What activities we have? Both from a military and civic approach. And then at the workshop we will discuss whether we're ready for it or not. Thank you. Very good, Maido. A good question. Who would like to answer? Everyone can answer. Let's begin with Eero. We feel that don't get on our way, and when you are being told go away, where they say there's no danger, stay here, don't take any opportunities of anyone else. War, unlike with other catastrophes, changes very quickly in time and space, which means we constantly need to have the newest information. And these pre-warnings will happen during the war as well. We will know more. And sometimes the Defence League will come and tell you situation has changed, leave this place. And they will say that for a good reason. And then also we have our own intelligence that we cannot disclose, but trust your country and help us protect our people, our communities. But the impacts of war are not only with bombs. It has a psychological effect in calming people down. People who know you, people who through mass media perhaps may not trust the information they get, but I see your role to lead the community and the life. And what also we covered before, life must go on. Children should be educated, etc., etc. So the tasks that the local governments have, you need to carry these on. So it's important to retain an opportunity to win, and from there on, it's the local government who will help us fight and direct us to the right people. For example, if we're seeking for places where we could cook for a large amount of soldiers, if we need a temporary hospital, if we need a place where we can store large amounts of ammunition. So these are the places where throughout the crisis we should have a dialogue. You can't have correct and common guidelines at the beginning of war. You need to manage it with the communities. Lea, if we take this Emergency Act closeness principle, then the local government should be the closest organization, closest to people and helping people. So the local government should be aware of its vulnerable target groups, how to reach them. They should have an overview and a plan. I know that the local government organization act and other legislation have a wide list of the local government's tasks, but we should have an overall idea what can be removed. But as the deputy mayor said, should we actually then still keep to our 30-day replies and advise locals, or can we actually postpone certain things? So priorities. So you would know in the local governments, you know who the people are, who are surrounding you, what are the companies, risk organizations, how am I prepared, how do I ensure my vital services in my own territory, and what services provided by the local government I could fulfill to a lesser extent. And with the state, we'll think through how this is all legal, how to decrease the capacity, who could support you, and etc. Veiko, what is your order to Maido? Yes, a lot of things have been covered, so I won't go through these again. It's the correct approach that this normal life must go on to the maximum extent, possible extent. It's quite mobile. We need help in informing the population so that the correct messages would go out through the correct channels, because we could be in a position where There's no internet, there's no TV, and maybe the courier will bring the correct letter to the correct place. So the other side is how people are able to cope themselves. So this is to do with the everyday smaller crisis as well. So that each person would know what they have thought through where they will go if A, B, C scenario will take place, and that they would be ready to cope. And those who do not cope, we should be aware of those too, and also to cooperate or cooperate with other local governments and take in people from neighboring districts, because we see that civil infrastructures are often hit. People die in the conditions of war, and the ones initially meant to accommodate people may not be there anymore. So we need alternatives, and very analyzed alternatives. Tauno. So many correct things have already been highlighted, but two things I'll highlight. First thing, Maido and the others, local government leaders, be prepared. Everything, all the service that you provide, please have the supplies, buy generators, have them in the heating plants, have them for apartment buildings. Think of alternative connections, create networks. So prepare. And please don't go into war. But the issue here is that today a lot of local government officials could be mobilized. And if the local governments often have the tasks of retain your tasks, and you will have more tasks during war, but if a lot of them or some of the people there are mobilized, then who will fulfill these tasks? Again, I'm not talking about you can't go into war, you can go to war, then who will? But the question needs to be solved in society. How on one side are, with the small amount of people we have here in Estonia, we would have enough soldiers, but at the same time, this front line of civil protection, the closest unit, the local government, would also be manned to fulfill its duties. Today, if I remember correctly, there's the leader of the local government. So Maido, be prepared to be the person who will fulfill all the tasks of the local government. But again, I'm not going to give out any answers, but it's a very important question, how to ensure. So perhaps we should just hire women at local governments. Your neighbor is there. She probably won't be mobilized.
Now I would like to give the chance to those in the audience to ask questions as well. Thank you. I'm from Pärnu, head of the Civil Protection Unit. There are a lot of threats. We have storms, floods in Pärnu. We also have hot girls in the beach. This 51 million that you were given, I wonder where this all went. I experienced in the committee where I work that we will have a paid staff member that will only focus on civil protection topics. I looked at the committee yesterday, listened to yesterday's conference, I'm listening to you, but you are all professionals, yet you are all parts of a puzzle. I don't think this trapeze metaphor is right. I think we need a triangle. Someone needs to put together the whole picture and find the right solution. I'm not talking about whether we need shelters, whether the war will be with missiles or an atomic war. But my question is, in a war situation, under which ministry should civil protection belong? Who should provide funding for this? What is your opinion? Which ministry should be in charge of civil protection? Lea, government office. I don't want to avoid the question, but I think it can't be just one ministry's responsibility area, because the Ministry of Internal Affairs can't pay for disaster medicine, and the Ministry of Social Affairs can't carry out rescue work. So I think the one in charge should be the government office. We also have space for development, but at the moment we are putting together a plan for civil protection, which includes the civil protection topics. What about in war environment? In a war situation, the civil protection should be under the auspices of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and we will see if we will include it in our plan as well. Like Tuuli said, if there is a crisis, we will all make an effort as much as we can, but the Ministry of Internal Affairs will be currently in charge of civil protection. Tauno, I have quite a long experience in solving crises, and if I've learned something, there's one thing alone. If in different crises you start changing things completely, then this is an early failure. In crises, only the solutions that work in peacetime will work. So our challenge is how to continue providing peacetime services in a context of crisis. You talked about war context, but it could be any crisis. If in crisis time we deviate completely from a peacetime way of doing things, then it will simply not work. In minor crises, I've seen that also in major ones, if we try to change communication and management methods altogether, then if we haven't practiced these daily, then it simply will not work. It might seem like a good idea that we have this clever person who will somehow come up with magical solutions, but if this person is killed, then there is nothing to do. I think crisis management should be carried out as broadly as possible, and only then can it be sustainable. Eero. Well, there are some who say that war is too important to leave it only for people in uniform to deal with, and these people are right to say it. If we are faced with an existential crisis, decisions must be made at a level as high as possible. We understand that decisions in such situations are not business as usual, because stakes are so high. We must have a higher management level of the state, a governance level here. Looking at wartime management, we have already given some of our sovereignty to international organizations such as NATO. And our governance can affect these decisions, but for that we need to have the involvement of the highest level governance. They need to be given the information and have the methods for making important decisions. And for that, as was mentioned, preparations must be made in peacetime. We need to practice anything that might be necessary during wartime, and we need to analyze what effect these actions have. Veiko, anything from the police? Yes, Tauno mentioned that if we manage crisis, that we should manage crisis just like we do manage normal situations. But I don't think we have capacity of crisis management at the state level, each of us. The example of Ukrainian refugees, for instance, at the beginning we tried giving the responsibility to those who are in charge of similar topics on a daily basis. But the fact is that if there are no daily crises, then it's very difficult if there is a crisis and you suddenly have to lead the solutions at the state level. I think that would put you in a very complicated situation, and the decisions made in such context, emergency plans and all the elements which are required for solving the situation were already there. They were adapted, but still the crisis management or managing the situation went in another direction. I often hear the question whether all state institutions should manage a crisis, or if there are some institutions that are simply better prepared for it because of their daily work, because of their level of preparedness. Of course, I'm not saying that some should be left out completely. Everyone has different competencies. I would like to follow this discussion, continue it. I generally agree, but in a war context, police was able to support crisis management because you didn't have other tasks at this point. But if your resources are already depleted because of managing your own operations, then you will obviously not have resources to help someone else. In peacetime, yes, organizations that have experience in crisis can support each other, but in a war situation we are all alone. I agree that there should be coordination, top-level management, governance, but all organizations need to have the chance to have a say in how things in their sector are being organized. Indeed, during a war, we all lack resources, and the question is how we are able to solve a situation in such lack of resources. The discussion we just heard showed me that we need higher level governance. You talked about who is responsible for what, but that's precisely why we need higher level governance and very clear priorities to be set. We are working on this today, we will keep working on this tomorrow. And some decisions not to take action also have a great impact today as well as tomorrow. And these decisions must be made at the level where political responsibility is taken. This is why higher level governance is needed, and we must understand that we are not all just solving our own problems. Perhaps at some point we must help other institutions and then change who we help at some point. That's why we need central governance to be in charge of this. Lea, please. It's very important to understand what management, what governance, what coordination all mean. If we asked in the room as well, I'm sure that we would have more than 3 opinions about what all of these terms exactly mean. Each institution alone knows exactly what their resources are. So the Defence League cannot be in charge of the health board, or the rescue service cannot be in charge of what's happening in the central hospital. These are perhaps extreme examples, but my point is that each institution is responsible for their own activities, and now we need coordination where there is a general point of view. Of course, it is the government that sets priorities and goals, and then ministries need to decide how to proceed precisely in each of the sectors, but everyone must cooperate. We cannot say that one ministry will be in charge of everything because they know everything. Eero, you wanted to add something? I feel that finally we were able to reach an intrigue that causes some debate in this panel. The COVID crisis was probably a good practice for the Police and Border Guard Board because it created a situation where in the Defence League we sent a lot of our own people to help others, to support others. It's not that we went to a hospital or to the police and said that we would now be in charge, but we were there available to help, waiting for tasks and ready to carry them out. I think what we saw in COVID is how the state should behave only in much larger scale. There must be central governance and experts must be allowed to give advice, to do their expert work. I do not think that the local government's head in Rakvere town would be able to take charge of the whole country. But I think we need to know exactly what each other's capacities are and what we can expect and what we cannot. There are sometimes very high expectations towards people who wear uniforms. And taxpayers seem to believe that we have endless resources of people who will just come and solve the issues. I'm very glad to see that we have such a lively debate in the panel, but now, because I see a lot of hands in the room, I will take a few more questions. I hope Pärnu received a reply, including where the 50 million euros was invested. And I'm very glad to hear that someone will be in charge of crisis and civil protection in Pärnu. Next question, please. What happens to people's critical thinking in a war context, and how can the state help people? Who would like to answer? How can we support people in crisis using critical thinking? This is a very deep question. Critical thinking is something that people must be taught early on. It's not something that can begin in a crisis situation, especially if it's remote. What the state can do to foster critical thinking is to give people information to proceed with. propaganda, if it's our own, it's welcome. But it must not hide facts, and it must not take away the person's possibility of critical thinking. Spreading information, well, doesn't automatically make people think critically. But the skill of critical thinking should be there before a crisis. Tauno?
Not sure if I understood the question exactly, but I'll again create the bridge back to yesterday. I'd like to support the colonel here. I can't remember who it was, but someone said that if we're talking about the dangers of war to people, then it always has a comma, but we don't have it, and it won't happen here. So forget everything that happens after the comma, because I don't know why we keep believing that people will start to panic when you tell them the truth. I've never seen this happen, but somehow people feel that if we tell them the truth, then all panic will break loose. This has not been proved in real life. So we should tell people the truth, both in the preparation phase and also during the active phase. And people have to have the tools, not just that I will tell you the truth and now see how you will manage, but I will tell you the truth and I will give you advice what you should do just in a preparation phase. Because if people are prepared, and they can only prepare if they know the actual risks, and they can actually come to life, not just that it will never happen here. So it will definitely help. But at the same time, during COVID, all the shops were cleared out of toilet paper because people kind of did what they found easiest to do. They went to the shop and bought toilet paper. So where was the critical thinking there? If you wanted to say it was panic, then in such panic, I'd like to live in such panic. It is actually that we're again afraid that people will buy all the food from the shop. Why people bought toilet paper, I really don't know. Maybe this was just lack of information. People weren't advised what to buy, and wanting to do something, people then bought toilet paper. But if we have this panic of shopping, and they buy all the rice and buckwheat and everything, bring it home, and they create a 7-day preparation before crisis, then in such panic and crisis, that's what I'd like to experience. This is panic. What we should avoid is people coming to the street, but panic in a sense that to have necessary supplies at home, this is just great. Yeah, the technical side I'd like to add. We need to rehearse people to consume channels where the state will provide them with the correct information. If we say today that listen to the public broadcast channels, then this is where you will have this controlled information, and no flat earth information will be shared. So this could be one of the options, how we manage this critical thinking of people and the correct consumption of information. And what we as the state must do is to ensure that these channels would be operating regarding physical protection, whether they are in this one physical location or, as people said, they're mobile. Because the national TV channel could actually broadcast from Võru and Saaremaa, so different parts of Estonia. So this is what we're already doing as a state today, and can carry on during a crisis. Yes, I think that listen to the state. We need to be prepared as state that we won't fail here. Because if you listen to the state, but do not receive correct information, the next time you won't listen to them. So for us as a country, it gives us high expectations. But Veiko, how critical thinking on your side? First, knowledge should be acquired at school, which is vital for everyday coping skills and also important in crisis situations. So this adequate information should be from the correct controlled source, and the responsibility for the information provider is much higher. What will have a critical mass of people in the society who you can tell them anything you like, but they will have take their own truth from somewhere. We see that in the everyday cases as well. If you receive a phone call, don't give your money to cyber criminals. Don't drink certain drinks; they're not going to cure you. So we'll always have these people. But information from the right source from the right weight is we can do that, and we need to learn at school. We still have those as part of the curricula. I saw that someone else wants to ask a question here.
I talked to you yesterday about use of science. And if I look at the text of today's discussion, protection of the residents, okay? I think it's a matter of time and a matter of consciousness. Time meaning the government's responsibility in this case. I'm sure you are very well prepared in all ways and don't like to disclose any security issues. And I don't know what you are prepared for, so I have to look at it from my point of view. And that is like in the North Sea on a rig, as I told you yesterday, they have to show how much time is available if you are hit by an explosion, etc. Do you have enough time for evacuation? So I believe a mass evacuation, where should people go? And should you start for a long-term planning of shelters like they have in Finland, for example? That's a part of the building code in Finland. Something in the long term. Consciousness, you started with that question, because we have so far talked about it from your point of view. But move this over to the citizens. What they need not to be naive anymore. So how do you prepare them to what I mentioned yesterday about pandemics, what we call participatory governance? How can they be more conscious, being involved in the loop, and know what they do, where do they go, and that you have a macro evaluation looking at science. What can hit, where will it hit, and where can people be protected from that point? So 2 points, use science in order to see how much time is available, and use citizen and make them consciousness about their own situation. I know that's a risky thing because you don't want to scare them. And as you mentioned, start with the school and do this in a long term. We still have time. But I mean, the Israeli attack by Hamas was a wake-up call. The Americans, why didn't they know things about this beforehand? And do we know everything? And I'm sure that Putin is doing everything he know about the Israeli attack by Hamas, because he's getting more and more desperate as he's not winning Ukraine. So what will he do next? So those things, 2 things, time and consciousness.
No nii, et küsimus siis ajastuses ja...
So question about timing and preparedness of people, psychological preparedness that we have managed to cover in our discussions. But again, what are your what are your ideas to these questions, Eero? I think that we are following the right direction. I'm not saying that we're there yet. We are telling our people how we try to get people to think along what are different crises and how to handle different crises. And I think one right move is that as a state we have decided that we're educating our people in secondary school about different state security measures, and this year is part of the curricula, so we can get the whole age group involved. And I also believe that a child that goes home, or a young adult, if we talk about secondary school students, they are the ones who help the whole family to prepare for crisis, bring new information and get other family members involved. What happens if, in addition, different voluntary groups in Estonia that raise awareness and have discussions are going over the top? For example, how the Defence League women's voluntary group with the rescue board work, this is very good, but the question is it enough? Do we reach all the places? Yes, the question to the last three questions is no, but should we carry on? Yes, we should carry on. And if our people understand what they should be afraid of, and we reach the point that we set an example, and we're role models, how to function. Concerning times, we're not talking about single incidents. We should have a statewide strategy, and even mentally, we should be prepared for a very long war doesn't happen for 5-6 days. And our whole conversation about we are a small country can be true, but we are a part of a very large military bloc, and to get it to work, that will take time. And this time, in a sense, we need to buy for our allies, and we need to understand what risks come with it and what harm can be done to the population if we fail. And we should also think about plan B and plan C and tell people things honestly, but that we have already done in Estonia. Yes, when you highlighted that state security studies are mandatory in secondary schools, then what are these behavioral theories showing? From what age can people's crisis behavior be changed? Then the answers are that these are children between or aged around 10, they're young mothers, and certain groups, so with different targets you can have different work, and to reach how it would be possible to change crisis behavior. And clearly there are no quick solutions. It'd be naive to expect them. Tauno, yes, the change in paradigm in Estonia, it has already happened. One of the impacts of war is that we can use the word war in our society. Before we try to kind of wiggle about and talk about state security crisis and whatever we were talking about, we can now say the word war, and we can talk about getting ready, prepared for war. When we, practical example, I think it was 2018 when we wanted to publish, we published this first Be Ready booklet that we sent out to people. Then initially this project included getting prepared for war. And on a very high political level, we had a ban not to use these chapters. But at the same time, in Sweden, that they are like security-wise in a safer place than we are, and they had the same booklet published if crisis or war comes. So one of the paradigm changes is that we are brave enough to use the word war, and we can talk about getting prepared for war. So this has already happened in Estonia, and also getting prepared. This is another, well, if not the most important part. If before we lived in the knowledge that getting prepared for a peacetime crisis, for example, electricity, that will also function in war, then obviously we have very war-specific preparation methods, and it's important that we will talk about that as well. So the question was asked about the Finnish construction code, where the shelters come with the buildings if they're larger than 1,600 square meters, but we also must make preparation for war. Veiko, what do you have to add? Again, I'd like to compare us to Finland. We have a common shelter number that we filled. We are missing 1 million. This is the real life, but I agree with previous speakers that we are more brave to talk about it. We're talking about what is war in our society, but the actual behavior is not quite there yet. There's a long way to go. Perhaps the same safety belt example, if you have a child in the car that you put the seatbelt on them all the time, then that would also remind you to put your seatbelt on. It's the same example that at school we're teaching young people that that the future generation would cope than the existing one. But the generations who don't think like that, if we would reach them as well. So we had a couple of elements there through different volunteer organizations, for example, like Maido, through local governments. There are opportunities there how to carry this message across. And on the other side, we are facing real figures of 15% in crisis preparedness. So we're not there yet.
Lea, would you also like to reflect on this question? I think informing young people is something that we could do better, in the sense that civil protection classes, yes, they do exist in secondary school now, but preparing for war, for crisis, is also about basic manual skills, such as using a saw, putting nails in the wall, using a spade for digging the ground. I've heard that some boys go to conscription and they can't get shoes with laces on because they are looking for Velcro strips. We are living in an IT world where our thumbs are very mobile, and our school results are great. We have top results in PISA tests, but the practical skills that you need in a war context, in these we are not very strong. And I think that more resources should be dedicated to that. Thank you. And one more quick question from the audience. Thank you. I am an outside observer. You could say I'm not a member of any structures. I am a chaplain at the Academy of Security Sciences. One thought I had while listening to this panel is that we are looking at service providers sitting in the room, and local governments are also service providers. But when it comes to civil protection and local view, we should think that this is not service. Every person should be able to survive themselves, and that's something we have forgotten. Yes, we have civil protection classes in secondary schools, but we should also have survival classes. As individuals, as the society, we expect to receive everything as services. But then in a crisis, would we be sitting in our armchair waiting for the service provider to arrive? In a way, recent situations such as climate disasters and the COVID crisis have shown that we have people among us who are willing to take responsibility and who are willing to go and help simply as members of the community. That's something we should pay more attention to in the society. A village community must be able to cope, perhaps even without anybody else intervening. State-level services is one thing, but they should be more about guidelines for each citizen. There should be a basic understanding of how they would survive in situation A or B. That's a long journey, but that was my idea. Thank you for this brief question. So, how to get the service of civil protection into people's minds? How to change mindsets? I wouldn't say these are opposing ideas. I don't think the states providing services should mean that people shouldn't be ready at home and that they shouldn't contribute actively during crises. I think the Estonian society has proved several times what they can do. For instance, during the refugee crisis, we had lots of volunteers who were willing to help. But this takes me back to the state side of things, and I want to ask who is offering a coordination service for volunteers. Everyone was willing to take the passenger car, go to the Ukrainian border and bring a family to Estonia, but then eventually someone would have to welcome the family, someone would have to do the next steps. I think both sides should work together. I think the state-level services should provide instruction for volunteers and provide information that it's important to help others. I think today we haven't heard much the word cooperation, but I think individuals and services should also cooperate. Now we have 1.5 minutes remaining. Let's have a quick round of conclusions. I'm going to ask everyone the same question, and I would like to have very quick answers. In the coming years, our budget is not great, but civil protection is important, as our discussion showed. What is one thing that must be done? Eero. People's trust. People being sure that we are not telling them lies, that we are doing the real thing. The correct information space, sharing right information and finding the channels of getting to people. Awareness among people and cooperation. I liked what one person mentioned, the English word consciousness. I would like to finish with this. If we have consciousness in the society, we have already made a great leap. Thank you so much for this interesting panel discussion. I feel very inspired to move forward. I feel that we have a good cooperation and we will be able to overcome any crisis.